Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Prejudice, Stereotyping, and Discrimination chapter. This is part one. So today we're going to talk about some important stuff regarding the social psychology of prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. So the first thing we need to do is kind of get some definitions here, because these things get thrown around quite a bit as in terms of what we mean and what we don't mean. So first, when we're talking about these things, stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination, we need to discuss what's going on. All of these have to do with understanding people in terms of the group that they fit in, whether that group is chosen or not chosen. These things apply to any form of a group, right? So whatever group membership somebody fits in, perhaps it's the school you attend, the race you have, the religion you are, your gender, whether you wear glasses, whatever it happens to be, whatever the group is, we can perceive them differently based on their group. Stereotypes are beliefs that we have about members of groups. So stereotypes about group members. So for example, a belief that people who wear glasses are smarter. That is a stereotype. It is a belief. It's kind of like, whether it's true or not, it's a fact in somebody's head, right? A belief in somebody's head. That's the stereotype. All people who wear glasses are smart. Prejudice is slightly different. Prejudice is an attitude. Now remember, attitude is an evaluation of an object. So in this case, to be prejudiced means to like or dislike someone based off of their group membership. So if you think, oh, people who wear glasses, they think they're smarter than everybody else. I don't like people who wear glasses. That's prejudice. Okay, the belief is that people who wear glasses are smarter. That's the belief, the stereotype. Prejudice is the evaluation of those people based off of that group membership. I don't like people who wear glasses, for example. Discrimination is when we behave differently towards those people based off of that group membership. So the belief is people who wear glasses are smarter. The attitude is I don't like people who wear glasses. The behavior is I spit on somebody who wears glasses, or I turn my back to anybody who wears glasses, or I make fun of somebody who wears glasses. That's the discrimination. So stereotype is the belief, prejudice is the attitude, and discrimination is the behavior. So in this video, we're going to talk mainly about the stereotype stuff. We'll get to prejudice and discrimination a little bit more later on. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at these slides. So I'm going to show you these dots in just a second. I just want you to guess how many dots there are on the screen. Don't pause, right? Just guess. Here we go. We're going to go through these kind of quickly. Here we go. Okay, how many dots? Write them down somewhere. Write them down wherever you want to write them, not necessarily on the screen. How many dots do you think there were? Now, my question is for you is, how many dots were there? Were there fewer than 11 or more than 11? Okay, great. Thank you for telling me that. Now, I want you to tell me, how much do you like the group that chose more than 11 dots? Whether that's your group or the other group, whether you're in that group or not, how much do you like the group that chose that there were more than 11 dots? Okay. What we just did is a minimal groups design. So Todgeville and Turner created this idea of minimal groups. So what does it have to do with stereotypes? Well, yeah. Humans love to put themselves into groups. We call these in-groups and out-groups, and we'll talk about this in just a second a little bit more. But we are we really love to have groups that we fit in and that we don't fit in, even if those groups are minimal. For example, the random people who happen to have guessed that there are more than 11 dots or fewer than 11 dots. That is a minimal group. The group doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything. But take a look at these data. These data are actually from when I've done this in person with a clicker question. The lighter color, right? This lighter bluish color, that is people who guessed fewer than 11, right? They thought there were fewer than 11. And the darker blue guessed more than 11. So what we're seeing here is that the people who said more than 11, over about 50% agreed that they really liked it, right? Really liked that group. But look at the people who guessed fewer than 11. They were either neutral or disliked. Look at this, 67, 77, 85, 85% of the people were neutral or disagreed with the idea that they liked the group that chose more than 11. Now, I never said that you had to hate somebody. I never said that you had to like somebody. I didn't say that you had to like or dislike the group. But people, even when they're put into a minimal group, in this case, the group has like no meaning whatsoever, right? You just randomly guessed on the thing, but then suddenly you're taking sides. Look, 19% of the people don't like somebody based off of some stupid random group. That is what the minimal groups paradigm is saying, is that we humans love to put ourselves in groups. And once we put ourselves in groups, we like to like our own group, our in group, and we like to dislike the out group, even when it's something as stupid as how many dots were on the screen. Got it? So what if it's something more integral to our identity, like religion or race or nationality or gender or whatever happens to be? What they're saying is that we as humans love to have in-groups and out-groups, and that with those in-groups and out-groups, we naturally start assigning goodness and badness based off of whether somebody is in our in-group or not in our out, or not in our in-group. They would be in the out-group in that case. Okay. So stereotypes are the cognitive component, meaning the beliefs, right? Beliefs. Attitudes also are cognitive, but the beliefs that we have about uh, about group members. So Lippmann in 1922, a long time ago, said this is the little picture we carry around inside our heads about a group. And since then, we've done so much more work on stereotypes. We know that stereotypes are actually really convenient for people for not using a lot of cognitive resources, right? We use this group. Oh, I see. You are a woman, therefore I should treat you like X, Y, and Z, right? It is convenient so I don't have to reprocess all the information. Now, whether it's accurate or good, totally separate issue. That's a totally separate issue. So these are generalizations about a group of people in which identical characteristics are assigned to virtually all members of the group, regardless of the actual variation among the members. So for example, all people who wear glasses are smart, right? And you can think of all sorts of stereotypes. I'm not going to go and list a bunch of stereotypes here, but you have a lot of different stereotypes. And they don't have to be bad, by the way. We often think of stereotypes as bad things, right? So all professors are absent-minded. That has a negative connotation, but whatever happens to be, it is. So white men can't jump is negative, but something like people who wear glasses are smarter, that tends to be positive, right? It's whatever we believe about those group members based off of their group membership. Okay. These are often culturally shared. They will be different depending on the culture that you happen to live in, right? Depending on your culture, you will learn these stereotypes. This gets us the idea of the us and them. The in-group is the people who are in our group, and the out-group is the people who are not in the in-group, right? Okay, so fine, we already talked about that idea. Let's talk some more about this idea of stereotypes. Remember when we talked about this in social cognition? Stereotypes are a form of schema. Schema is all the pieces of information we have about a specific topic. They tend to be in a network as well. So for example, I have a schema about Kentucky, which includes the Kentucky Derby, KFC, which used to stand for Kentucky Fried Chicken, and that they play basketball, right? And depending on how often things happen, those become more or less accessible. And if one aspect of the schema is primed, meaning made more accessible, then the whole school of fish, the whole schema becomes primed, meaning becomes more accessible. Well, schemas include stereotypes. For example, this is a schema of, I feel bad saying this because it is sexist, but this is a schema that somebody might have about women, for example. Now, you do not have to believe the schema in order to be able to identify the schema. So, for example, if there's a culturally shared schema that women are nurturing and moody and bad at math and kind, then you will know that those are all parts of the school of fish. They're beliefs, they're like facts, right? The beliefs that people have about this category, in this case, women. Now, you don't have to believe them, but you know that that schema exists, that stereotype exists. So what that means then is if you are primed with the idea of a woman, for example, then those can naturally become more accessible, even if you don't necessarily believe that particular stereotype. Let me make sure I'm clear about this. The stereotype about someone can be primed. The stereotype about someone who, whose group membership they belong to, the stereotype about that group can be primed even if you don't necessarily believe it yourself. Because wait a minute, didn't you just tell me that stereotypes are beliefs? Beliefs are just ideas of facts or a piece of information that are connected, right? So how much you like it, dislike it, etc. But knowing that it is there, knowing that it is connected, that's the belief that we're talking about, right? Knowing that that belief exists out there. That's the schema that we're discussing. Those things, all of them can be primed even when you don't necessarily personally believe them to be true. Those beliefs still exist and can be primed. Well, so who cares? Who cares if those stereotypes exist, etc.? If I don't believe them, then who cares? Well, let's go ahead and talk about stereotype threat. We're going to talk about stereotype threat, and we'll talk about some of these examples that go with it. Claude Steele is the author, is the main researcher involved with stereotype threat, and he wrote a book called The Bell Curve Revisited. Stereotype threat is the idea that just the apprehension, just worrying that that you are people thinking about your stereotyped group might actually make that happen. So the apprehension experienced by members of a minority group that their behavior might confirm a cultural stereotype, that apprehension might actually make it happen. Okay? So here's what I mean by this. So, for example, sports, race, and attribution. There's a famous study where athletes, in this case they were all male athletes, were asked about their race, right? Tell me about your race. That's it. Okay? So we primed them with their race. All right? Then we talked, and then they were asked to perform a task. When the task was said to be a strategic task, white athletes did better than black athletes. When the same task was said to be an athletic task, a test of athletic ability, the black athletes performed better than the white athletes did. So the stereotype threat is that if I know that there's a stereotype that black athletes are not as good at strategic behaviors compared to white athletes, then when you prime me with black, if I'm a black man, then I'm so worried that I'm going to make it seem like black men can't do a strategic task that I actually do worse. Thus, reinforcing the stereotype. Gender and attribution, it doesn't matter what the stereotype is, right? It doesn't have to be just a racial stereotype. Whatever the stereotype is, people can be so worried about it happening that it can actually make it come true. Let's talk about this example. So there's one study where they all of the participants were Asian women. Okay, they were all Asian women. They were randomly assigned to respond to the question, what is your race versus what is your gender? Then they were given a math test, and the math test was the same for everybody. When they indicated their gender, right, they were a woman, they did worse on the math test. When they indicated that they were Asian, they did better on the math test. The idea of stereotype threat in this case is saying that, hey, if I'm a woman and I know that there's that schema that women are bad at math, and I just had to say I'm a woman, that's priming me with that whole schema, right? I'm a woman, oh, the whole schema, I'm bad at math. Now I take this math test, oh man, this is a math test. Oh man, people think that women are bad at math. As I'm taking this test, I'm so worried that I might reinforce that stereotype that I actually do worse and reinforce the stereotype. Whereas women who are randomly assigned with a stereotype that does not include being bad at math, in this case Asian, they actually perform significantly better. The worry about the stereotype coming true made it come true. Not because the people believed the stereotype necessarily, but because the apprehension that it might be shown led to it happening. That's stereotype threat. Is stereotyping inevitable? Well, we do know that stereotypes can be activated automatically. You don't have to sit there and think, oh, look over there. That is an old person. I think old people are kind of stinky and boring. So I'm going to discriminate against that old person by not talking to them, right? No, you just automatically do it. It happens automatically without you thinking about it. Okay, does that mean that we're biased by them? Well, let's go ahead and talk about, let's watch a video. We're going to watch this video and then we'll talk about what it means in terms of stereotype and then subsequent actions, prejudice and discrimination that might happen because of stereotypes. So let's watch this video. All right, in that video, you saw that people had certain beliefs about a group, right? So the group is people who wear pantyhose on their head, all right? That's the group. There are certain beliefs that you have. People who wear pantyhose on their head are criminals, they're robbers. That led to, as you saw, a very automatic reaction, specifically with the clerks and owners of stores as to what was going on. As soon as they saw that, they almost immediately behaved in a specific way, and that was to run away, to act scared, etc. Now, we are assuming that there's some prejudice involved, right? They disliked the person who was wearing the pantyhose on their head, right? But did you see how fast that was? Now, I want you to imagine yourself in the same situation. Let's assume that you're a store clerk. Somebody walks in with pantyhose over their head. What automatically happens to you? Well, probably this idea that this is a criminal and they're going to rob me, and you feel panicked and you start to act differently. Probably a pretty automatic response that's going to happen. Now, I want you to think about that same situation, but now, instead of it being pantyhose on somebody's head, maybe it's the color of their skin, or their gender, or their religion. Maybe, for example, in the United States, maybe that's a black man. They walk into the store and people have certain stereotypes that become primed or activated and can immediately, even unknowingly in certain cases, lead them to feel and behave and think in certain ways. This is getting into the idea of implicit bias. So let me give you an example of Payne in 2006. This is just, there's lots of different examples of these things. So here's how this study goes. Participants are shown very briefly, really, really quickly, like, in fact, this one might be totally subliminal. I don't think it was, actually. It's really fast, though. What they do is first they're shown, flashed on the screen, a picture of a face. And that face was either going to be a white person or a black person. Okay? Then, after that, so flash the face, then flash a picture. The picture is either a weapon or it's a tool, right? So like a gun would be a weapon or a hammer would be a tool. And then this just really, really brief. So brief flash of the face, brief flash of the item, and then they look at a mask. This is called a mask. It's nothing, right? It's like white noise. You look at it and they ask then, was that a weapon you saw or was it a tool? Well, it turns out that when the participants were shown a black man before they saw the item, they were much more likely to say that that item was a weapon, even when it wasn't, compared to when they saw a white face. They were much less likely to indicate that something like a tool was a weapon, right? People associated a black man with a weapon. Now, if you ever asked that person and said, hey, do you believe that black men are criminals? They would probably say, no, oh, no, oh, man, oh boy, that's racist. How dare you? But, do you know, but this association happened because black man was in the same schema as weapon. They all became primed at the same time, quickly, automatically, unconsciously. We see this in the IAT, which we've talked about previously before, which can look at the ideas of whatever group it happens to be, right? And see whether or not you like or dislike them or have specific stereotypes, whatever's associated with them. It's the implicit association task, right? The association happens because of the schema that it happens to be in. Well, so this, for example, has also been critiqued. Now, I'm not going to go through it because we talked about this previously, but there's a critique of it that this can be interpreted as assessing familiarity or mere cultural knowledge, irrespective of personal endorsement. For example, even African Americans have negative stereotypes towards African Americans, according to the IAT. Others would say that, well, isn't that exactly the point? Isn't that the point that if those associations exist, then the behaviors, just like the people in the store with the pantyhose on their head, wouldn't those behaviors be next to come, even if you're not even aware of those associations? So what I want to do next is actually, let's stop right there. Let's stop right there. We'll take a pause, and we will move on after this.